Every community has a story. Some are easy to tell. Others remain hidden behind closed doors. Across America, the opioid crisis has changed millions of lives. It has touched cities, suburbs, and small towns, proving addiction does not recognize age, background, or community lines. Here in Jasper County, we have felt that impact too. Behind every statistic is a person, a family, a story. But even in crisis, hope exists, because sometimes the people best equipped to guide others through darkness are the people who once lived there themselves. Today, we meet Emily Ginn, a peer support specialist at the New Life Center, someone who transformed lived experience into purpose. Her story is about resilience, recovery, and what happens when silence no longer gets the final word. This is Emily's story.
I have worked as a peer support specialist since October of 2022, so 4 years. And my role as a peer support specialist, so my job is to share my lived experiences in addiction and recovery. It is to advocate for my clients, whatever that will look like, whether that's like to DSS or drug court or to their own family. I help to advocate for them. I help to give them resources, whether that's employment or housing, transportation, any kind of resources, whatever that looks like, that's part of my job. In a sense, similar to like case management, but the big thing is to share my experiences. I never ever thought in a million years that I would work here. I was a client here like 3 separate times throughout my addiction. And it was just, they offered me the job and I said, yeah. So it wasn't necessarily it was not a passion of mine until it became a passion of mine. Like it wasn't anything like that I'd like, oh, I want to do this so bad. But once I got here, I'm like, oh, I want to do this so bad. I would say when I was still in the streets, it was a lot to do with like the real pharmaceutical opioids. And then it progressively went to pressed pills on the street. And now I'm really glad that I'm out of the game because it's a lot, fentanyl's in everything. I mean, fentanyl was my drug of choice, was my primary substance of use. But, they're putting fentanyl in everything. So I just feel as though you never know what you're getting anymore. There are things that could like kratom that mimic opioids. It's not an opioid and it is natural, but it's just as addicting as your Percocet, So I just feel like it's just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And it was already strong enough almost 5 years ago when I was still using. So I would just say, I guess that's really what's changed. I mean, a lot has changed, but the strength of it, like what you think you're getting is not really what you're getting. That's always been the case as well. But yeah, it's rough out. I mean, rough out there in them streets today more than it was when I was out in the streets. So. Opioids. Okay, so scientifically speaking and biologically speaking, I am not sure. But I can tell you my experience with that. And I felt as though when I was on opioids, which was what I started on was Percocets, it was like the Percocet or the opioids just got in the driver's seat and just completely like took over. It was all I could think about. I couldn't divert that thought to anything other than that. That's all I cared about. And then the withdrawals from opioids, oh Lord, I felt like my bones were disintegrating. It was horrible. It it's an experience I'm so glad I don't have to experience any longer. But it just takes full control. That's about the best I can give you. I started with like a perk 5 and I puked the first time I took it. So you think that was the good Lord trying to say, don't do this. But, you know, I know better. I know better than everybody else, even Jesus. But I didn't. I tried it again and it was off and running after that. One perk 5 turned into 2 perk 5s to 3 perk 10s. And then before you knew it, I was taking like 15 perk 10s at one time. And that was just basically getting me to like surface level. Like it wasn't getting me high, but it was getting me just to feel better. And then that progressed to fentanyl, heroin, all the things. It's, the disease of addiction is a progressive disease. So it just continues to get worse and worse. So I would also say that if you don't think it's going to happen to you, it can happen to you. Doesn't mean it will happen to you, but everybody, it can succumb to addiction, to opioid addiction. I was top of my class when I graduated, all the sports. I was somewhat financially responsible. So no one would have ever thought that it was me that would have succumbed to that. But it was, and it is hereditary too. So I know that I got it from my father. So yeah. Well, from my experience, at first, when I was taking such a low dose that I was never prescribed, by the way, okay, they were all bought off the street. It was funny. I wouldn't say funny. I don't know if that's the correct verbiage I want to use, but it was like, you took a perk, didn't you? I was like, yeah, why? And, and they could tell because I was different. I was like, I truly felt like I could conquer the world. I waited tables at the time, so it was like I was running circles around all the other waitresses, but that's what it did to me. And so it was just kind of fun and games at first because they would notice when I am and when I wasn't, but I still had a job, I still had my car, I still had a house. I didn't have kids at the time. And so it wasn't until I was so far deep into my addiction that my family finally was like, girl, you need to get some help, so I feel like I don't know if that would be considered what families miss, but I would say for my family and my experience, that was a missed opportunity to kind of educate me, but they weren't educated either. So no fault of their own. None of us were educated. I didn't even know what addiction was before I got my own addiction. So education and awareness is super, super important. So I don't know if that's necessarily what they'll miss, but I do also think that something that a lot of families miss is the difference between supporting and loving their loved one who's in addiction and enabling them. And it is a fine line because I've never been on the side of addiction where I have to tell my child, no, you can't stay here. So I feel for my parents and my grandma who, had to tell me no. They wouldn't feed me. They wouldn't, let me stay there. They wouldn't pay my bills anymore. But that was them not trying to enable me into the grave, basically, and then that was when my grandma stopped feeding me. I knew I needed something got to give because grandma always gonna feed me, I remember my sister even putting a plate of food and some Lucy cigarettes on her porch because her husband wouldn't let her get with me or enable me, which, I mean, I guess to an extent it was enabling, but having people, families, to understand that, like, that's the point, which you're missing the point. And the point is that you're going to love your addict so much that you're going to enable them into the grave, basically. So, yeah. Well, seeing as I said, you know, it like sits in the driver's seat and it just takes complete control of my brain because it is a brain disease. And I wouldn't say everyone's different. It's person by person. It's definitely, you know, what's good for the goose, it doesn't mean it's good for the gander. Whatever that saying is, you know what I mean. Okay. Overall, I would say it's a mental thing. Don't get me wrong, withdrawals are horrible. They truly, truly are. But it's mental, and your brain is so powerful that it can convince you of anything. Okay. It can convince you that you're in withdrawals and you're not. Like, oh, it's been 5 hours since I've used, I'm in withdrawal. I'm not, but my brain is making me think that. It's making me believe that. It's convincing me of that. So I would also say that opioid addiction is very difficult to overcome because it is, I don't want to say that it's easily accessible, but it somewhat is. Depending on the doctor, they'll just write you a script for anything. Now, I do know a lot of pain managements because my dad is on pain management, but I don't know what it's like to just take that as prescribed. You know, like that's a life I've never known. Well, since my addiction, I've never known that. So because some people, it's kind of like THC nowadays, where it's welcomed by so many. And I wouldn't say like society as a whole welcomes opioid use, but it's not meth. Do you know, if you compare them, like, oh, right. Right. And it's like, and then once you've justified the fact that it's okay to do that, regardless, even if you're prescribed to it. I know people who are addicted to their prescription of opioids. You know, I wish that there were more alternatives. I wish that there were more natural, so to speak, remedies that you could take. And I also know I am a big believer, huge believer in medication, whether that is medicated assisted treatment or whether that is because they do have MOUD, so medication for opioid use disorder. Huge advocate. It saved my life. Would not be here today if it wasn't for that. So I do think that people should take opioids, but I think it just gives more way for the progression of the disease of addiction to just get worse and worse over time, you know, because once your body gets dependent on it, you have to take more. Anyway, it's just a vicious cycle. So, yeah. You know, garbage or trash. So the fact that this is verbiage really for me, it's all about the words. Words are powerful. Okay. You can speak life and the death in the tongue. And there's never any lost hope for anybody. And so that's a misconception in itself. People thinking, oh, they're too far gone. No one's ever too far gone, ever. And people thinking, oh, once an addict, always an addict. I mean, to an extent, that is true. I do believe for myself that I will always be an addict. I will always battle that in my brain every day to not use. And that's okay. It's harder. It is harder to not get high than it was to ever get high. But, you know, when people give you second chances and they give you they have faith in you enough to like give you a second chance or a third chance or a fifth chance or a 20th chance, okay? That's when that misconception can be proved wrong, because I'm living proof of that once an addict, always an addict, because I'm here today working at the alcohol and drug agency. Never in my life, never thought that would ever happen. But yeah, I think the biggest misconception would be that people assume that we're like losers and we're not worth shit, and we're, they might not be getting high, but they're still going to steal from you. Like, just because I stole from Sally during active addiction doesn't mean that I'm going to steal from Sally now. I would never. In my natural brain anyway, I would never. But addict brain, don't come near me. But anyway, yeah. Well, if we go back to the whole families enabling their loved ones who are using, I would say if they're still, if families are still enabling their loved one who's using, financially, you're gonna be $20 to death. They gonna be begging, they gonna ask you for $20 every chance they get. And that's just the reality of it, and that's okay too. I mean, it's not okay, but like that's. I've come to terms with, if I'm not as transparent about my own addiction, how can I expect anybody else to feel comfortable or confident enough to share and be open about theirs, but nonetheless, Dan, what was the question? I'm sorry.
How does addiction affect
families
emotionally?
So yeah, my parents or my grandparents, they used to pay my light bill, or they would give me money to pay my bills, but that money didn't go to bills most of the time. Okay. So financially, it takes a huge, huge, huge burden on families. Like, I never thought that I'd ever steal from my family, and I quite literally did. They tried to blame my boyfriend at the time, but all in all, it was my idea to steal my granddaddy's tools out of his shop. Okay, took it to the pawn shop, and so not only financially, as in just like the monetary, like the actual cash money, but like the things that they worked hard for in their life to get what they got, I stole. They got it back. That's neither here nor there. I still stole it, So it 100% takes a huge toll on family. It is a family disease to an extent, and then emotionally, like I said earlier, I don't know what it feels like. I somewhat know what it feels like to be on this side now that I work here and I'm in recovery, and I'm the ministry leader of Life Recovery, which is just like a community-based support group. So like, I'm all in recovery everywhere I go. Okay. Like, my life revolves around recovery, but for me, that's what keeps me sober today. But I don't know what it feels like to have to tell your child or your sibling or your mom or dad, okay, they can't stay at your house, or you're not going to pick them up and take them anywhere, or quite literally have to show tough love and cut them off completely. I don't know what that feels like, and I hope I never have to. I'm about to get emotional, and I hope I never have to know what that feels like.
Recovery doesn't happen alone. Behind every person finding their way forward is a community willing to walk beside them. At New Life Center, hope is found in everyday moments, through encouragement, peer support, understanding, and the reminder that no one has to face addiction on their own. And the good news is, help isn't far away. Across Jasper County, individuals and families have access to resources designed to meet them where they are, whether they're taking their first step toward recovery or continuing the journey they've already begun. Because asking for help isn't a sign of weakness, it's the beginning of healing. And in Jasper County, that help is here.